So I was meant to be working on a completely different video, but I found this High on Life situation quite interesting, so I felt like I wanted to talk about it. Now, I'll probably have footage of the game showing up right now, so you know exactly what I'm talking about. But if you're unaware, High on Life is the first-person shooter that is very Rick and Morty-esque. I can't remember if it's the writers or the voice actors. I know one of the voice actors is involved with it, but I don't know if the writing team is also part of this game. But anyway, it's a Xbox Game Pass release, just came out like a week ago. And if I'm being 100% honest, when I first saw footage of this game, I wasn't very interested. Now, let me be clear, I don't mean to say that I was disinterested or anti-High on Life. I just felt very indifferent is probably the best way to describe it. I'm always happy to give a unique and quirky game a try, but at the same time, I've never seen a single episode of Rick and Morty, so when I hear that dude's voice, part of my brain just said, well, if you're not into Rick and Morty, then you probably won't be into this. I was probably going to download it and then leave it installed on my Xbox for about 4 or 5 months while I catch up with other stuff that I'm trying to get around to. So it was going to be on my to-play list, but way down on the list. And so this game releases like a week or so ago, and the reviews start dropping. And I want to say on the first day of all of the initial reviews popping up, it had a Metacritic score of about 55. Now, over time, that has risen to 68 is what it's currently at as I'm talking now. But basically, the number is yellow, not green, yellow, which to a lot of people, I feel like when you see a yellow number instead of green on Metacritic, you kind of go, eh. But it wasn't too long ago that I had a look at how many games got a yellow score on Metacritic that I did actually end up enjoying, but that sort of diverts from the point. What I found interesting about this is all the reviews came out, and the majority of them were kind of, I suppose, rolling their eyes a bit, and, you know, some people just kind of saying like it's a very average shooter and nothing too great or special, hence the, 68 aggregate review score it has now. But then everybody else got their hands on it. And because it's on Game Pass, it's very accessible. And all of a sudden, this game just exploded. Obviously, people jump on social media and they say, hey, this game's okay. And people start sharing clips of, funny bits of dialogue or just funny set pieces and quirky bits. And now it's just spread like wildfire. Those clips that have gone viral have now turned this into one of the biggest games ever since the launch of Game Pass. At this, current time now, as I am speaking, High on Life is the biggest Game Pass launch of this year. It is the biggest third-party Game Pass launch of all time, as well as the biggest release of a single-player game in the service's history. So those are all very well and good. Basically, that means there's just a hell of a lot of people playing this game all of a sudden. But on top of that, what makes it more interesting is that this giant wave of people that have now come to this game, they're almost, I don't know, there's something going on where all of the chatter around this game was a bit eye-rolly, but that talk was largely led by the critics of the big publications, the critics of the big websites, and I'm assuming, a couple of big streamers out there maybe. And now this game is in the hands of everybody else, and they're kind of going against what those reviews initially said. Essentially, the narrative on this game is changing now into, actually, no, it's pretty good, or it's not so bad. Like, the talk around it is, this game is hilarious, this game is one of the funniest things ever, this game is one of the most fresh and unique shooters that have been released in recent years. But what I find kind of fascinating about this is, for me, as far as I can tell, everything suggests that as we move forward, subscription services like Game Pass, like PlayStation Plus, that seems to be where we're heading. And this explosion in popularity for High on Life would not have been possible at all if it was not a Game Pass game. I still think it would have done okay, I still think it would have done well. It wouldn't have been breaking records, is essentially what I'm saying. Now, obviously in the past, people would review games and that would dictate or hold at least a lot more weight on how well a game was going to do long term. But we're now in this era where people can just try things for themselves when, as soon as they get a chance. And especially as internet services get better and people can start downloading things a hell of a lot faster. Like, it got me thinking, do reviews at some point become borderline irrelevant? Irrelevant is probably a strong word, but I do think that we're crossing over into the space where review scores basically just become a number that fanboys of Viva Console use to sort of win an argument with online, and that's kind of it. Because we've seen this happen with TV and movies. Like, there's a lot of bad stuff on Netflix or Amazon or Disney Plus, whatever. There's a lot of bad to mediocre stuff that's gone viral and has got a bunch of sequels or continued seasons, all that stuff. And now when you combine this new subscription service model that we're all so used to now, along with streamers who arguably, it's probably not a silly thing to say at this point that streamers hold more power over gamers' purchasing decisions than people like IGN, GameSpot, whatever. I think we crossed that line a while back. And I want to be clear, like, I'm not making this video as like a jab at any of the reviewers and saying, oh, you were wrong or anything like that. Everybody's obviously entitled to their opinions, and I'm not one of those people who looks at reviews and be like, oh, these people don't know what they're talking about, or this website always gives terrible scores, or this isn't one of those videos. Let me be 100% clear. I'm a big fan of a lot of people's work over there. I've been following a lot of these sites for quite some time. But I think the reason this has caught my eye so much, and this is me getting back on my old man rant again, so apologies. But as somebody who grew up in the 90s and the 2000s, in the periods where the internet wasn't a thing or it wasn't as big of a thing yet, like, this High on Life situation almost reminds me a little bit of those days. Because the way that you discovered games back then, obviously there were the real big hitters that made a splash and, were probably promoted everywhere. But there was a level underneath all of the Metal Gear Solids, the Final Fantasies and the Crash Bandicoots. There was a level underneath that of, oh, have you played Driver? Like, there was a level, I don't want to say B tier and go on that rant again, but there was a level underneath that, and the only way you would get to learn about that sort of level under the top tier stuff was basically through friends, playground talk, essentially. Someone would say, hey, I've got this new game called Silent Bomber, it's pretty cool. And then you would, borrow the game or go and pick it up if you could afford it. And then you would tell somebody, and then they would tell somebody, you know what I mean? This sort of explosion would happen in these sort of like micro levels of like, hey, have you heard about this game called Lara Croft? There's supposedly a cheat code where she gets naked. Like, dumb stuff like that. And so I think this is why this has caught my eye a bit, really, is because it almost reminds me of back in those days where the chatter of just the general folk drove a game's sales rather than review scores. Because when I was buying games as a kid, it was literally, does the box art look cool? Does it have a robot or a ninja or a man with a gun on the front? Yep, alright, I'll buy it. Like, that was it. That was as much research I did when I was, I'd say, under the age of like 10 or 11. Then, I get a little older into my sort of early teen years, and the internet is pretty much, broadband is worldwide at that point, and I can check review scores and go based on that. And then you get more and more into this hobby, and you sort of drill down or sort of narrow your choices, and you get a bit more picky, and you get a bit more, you sort of develop this eye for things where you can spot a game and go, I'm not going to like that, so I'm not going to bother checking out. And you know what I mean? The more games you play, the more you develop your own taste. And the more you develop a taste, you almost become blind to other types of, sometimes you could become blind to complete genres. And High on Life is a game that I would have maybe got to, maybe not, depending, you know what I mean? Like, 2023 is a packed year, so by the time I had cleared all of the games in front of it, a whole bunch of others would have jumped the queue anyway. But it is quite satisfying in some ways, sort of letting this game speak for itself. People just seeing footage or a section of dialogue, you know, that whole, people just seeing it for themselves, trying it for themselves, and word just spreading. Something about that is satisfying to me. I have still yet to play this game, by the way. It's definitely moved up the list, especially as Callisto Protocol is apparently quite broken. But I hope we see more of this as we push forward into this whole subscription service future. A bit more of people just trying things for themselves. Like I said, I've not played this yet, so I may get stuck into it and then have to make another video in a few weeks going, oh, this game is terrible, I don't know what I don't know what everybody's talking about, but hopefully it is quite good. It looks fun. I hope it doesn't wear out its welcome. But I also hope people can relate to me on this old school vibe of how this game became so popular, you know what I mean? It's literally just word of mouth that has carried this game. But as I said at the top of this video, I was supposed to be working on a completely different video and got diverted with this one, so I'm going to go back to working on that one now. I just felt like I wanted to talk about High on Life for a second. So, I've been Inept Saiyan, you as always have been a wonderful audience, and I hope to catch you next time.